Alrighty, welcome everybody. My name is Martin from Birchal, and tonight we're really excited to be hosting the Southern Green Gas Investor Webinar. We have Rowan and Brett from the Southern Green Gas team here. Do you want to say hi, guys?
Hi, and good evening or good morning, wherever you're tuning in from.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here.
Thanks for that. So just while a few more attendees join, I'm just going to run through what we're going to cover this evening. And this part of the webinar is not the most essential part. So if you do have to run off for a minute or two, get a glass of water, go to the toilet, please feel free to do so. And then after that, we'll introduce the Southern Green Gas team properly and get stuck into the presentation, which will be the first 20 minutes that we'll go through. And then after, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And that's really why we're here tonight. So it's a very exciting offer, the Southern Green Gas investor offer that we're really excited to be hosting at Birchal. And tonight's all about allowing potential investors to engage with the founding team. So my recommendation is, if you have any questions, you'll notice there's a Q&A panel below, just in the toolbar of your screen. Feel free to ask those questions at any time, even if it's in the middle of the presentation, just so we can get them in there. And then after, once we get to the Q&A section, we'll go through them. What I like to do is prioritize the questions first come, first served. But if you'd like to ask multiple questions, you're more than welcome to do so. I'll just try to get to as many people first, and then we'll come back to your second question. So as a few more attendees join, I'll just give a very brief overview of why Birchal is particularly interested in hosting the Southern Green Gas offer. So this technology, really groundbreaking technology that's already gathered a lot of interest, with a number of government grants being awarded, so essential for the future in terms of sucking carbon out of the atmosphere. It was something that really jumped out at us, and we're very excited to be hosting the offer. We're in the second last week of the EOI campaign, so we're launching the offer next week on Tuesday. So this is the great time to connect with the founders, ask questions. We're recording tonight, so if anyone misses it, we'll be able to provide you with the YouTube link after to share it around. So now that I see we've got enough attendees here, what I'll do is I'll pass over to the Southern Green Gas team. Some brief introductions first. So we've got Rowan, founder and CEO, joining us, and we also have Brett, who is co-founder and BD and strategy director. So I'll pass over to you two now, guys, and you can get started with the presentation.
Great. Well, Brett, do you want to introduce yourself first, and then I'll go?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Brett Cooper, co-founder with Rowan Gillespie. Rowan and I have known each other for 30 years and built a number of businesses together, including infrastructure businesses. Very, very excited about the potential to harness Australia's renewable energy and world energy, renewable energy, for the purposes of capturing CO2 from the atmosphere. Thanks, Rowan. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to present to you tonight. I hope you enjoy it, and please feel free to ask whatever questions you like. So if I can go to share screen. Right, there we are. Okay, so yes, if I can start presentation for Southern Green Gas. I think to set the frame the issue that we're addressing, the planet is looking to achieve net zero by 2050, and that requires extraordinary combination of emission reductions, but also carbon removals. We're talking about a total of about 600 billion tonnes, a combination of CO2 emission reductions through substitution with renewables, and also through carbon removals, which is actually capturing the CO2 from the atmosphere and permanently storing it, either in geological formations or in oceans or other means. It's quite an extraordinary task that we are looking to undertake, but we're up to the challenge. So our mission for 2045 is to remove 1 billion tonnes of CO2 from the atmosphere. It's an aspirational target, but you can see it's just a very small part of what the planet needs to achieve. We've kicked off a business a few years ago, and through that time, we've managed to secure 2 collaborators so far, the APA Pipeline Group, who are working with us on e-fuels, and Aspiridac, who is working with us on carbon removals. And Aspiridac has been successful with securing some carbon credit buyers, which is the Frontier Group, which comprises some of the world's largest companies of Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, which of course is Facebook, and McKinsey & Co. and Stripe and Shopify. We are currently developing 3 products in a modular form. So they're solar power modules, which allow us to capture CO2 and either permanently store that CO2 or convert it to sustainable fuels or protein food. So on the left, you have our direct air capture module, which looks a bit like a 2-person tent, and the roof on those are PV panels. So it's completely standalone PV powered and modular construction for high volume, low cost manufacture and rapid deployment, as shown in the pictorial to the middle there. We also look to combine the CO2 with renewable hydrogen in an e-fuel module, and that can take the form of either renewable methane, which is what we're doing with the APA group, or renewable methanol, which is the liquid, or even renewable sustainable aviation fuel for the airline industry. And thirdly, it's quite recently, we started looking at the food protein market, which is really using CO2 to turn it into food protein for human consumption. At the heart of what we do is a technology called metal organic frameworks. It's been internationally recognized as a solution for DAC, direct air capture of CO2. And it has some very interesting properties which we're able to leverage for our product. It's very versatile technology. You can tailor its properties across many applications. And in fact, as our chief scientist says, you can pick from all the elements in the periodic table to form different MOFs. The particular MOF we're using has achieved breakthrough performance in terms of operating on humid air for CO2 capture. And we've also managed to be able to manufacture at scale cost effectively, which is very important in terms of product development. Our business model is quite flexible. We see the opportunity to secure cash flows in all parts of the value chain across the various market segments, right from the actual manufacture of the MOF material, which we call the absorbent for soaking up CO2 from the atmosphere, through to the module manufacture, through to the development of the projects which incorporate the modules, operating, maintaining them through their life, and also the actual sales of the products, either through carbon credit sales or through to product sales of e-fuels and food protein. So we see opportunities to participate in all aspects of that value chain, and depending on who we're dealing with in our collaborations, we'll work out with them the best way for us to participate. We're looking at a huge addressable market. As you saw in the first couple of slides, it is really a major problem, but in terms of where we're focusing, we're looking to get our costs down to, which is very much an industry target, to get the cost of CO2 extraction from the atmosphere down to $100 a tonne. And I think it's widely acknowledged that if we can achieve that, and others are seeking to also achieve that, the addressable market for CO2 becomes very, very large. And particularly in looking at the forecasts for 2030 for some of our market segments, 100 million tonnes per annum for carbon credits based on direct air capture, 60 million tonnes per annum for shipping and sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. And a Bloomberg source is quoted saying that a plant-based protein market could be 20 million tonnes by 2030. So that's not our numbers. That's reputable sources in the marketplace saying that these are potential growth in these market segments. So in terms of what traction we've achieved to date, We've proven it in the lab. We're now moving out of the lab into the field. Next, we'd look to fully commercialize and later really want to scale up the ecosystem. So in terms of what we've done to date, we've demonstrated efficient CO2 removal from the atmosphere with our proprietary MOF technology. We've achieved international recognition through our research partner at Sydney University, who won a Musk Foundation X Prize for carbon removals. And to date, we've secured $4 million in capital, which is a combination of venture capital investors, industry partner contributions, and government grants, which has been a very important source of capital for us. Now, as we move into proving in the field, we have a total of $8 million of projects underway with our industry partners, with Corporate Carbon and their subsidiary Spiridac for carbon sequestration, and e-fuels with the APA Pipeline Group. And as I mentioned previously, Spiridac has secured forward carbon credit purchases agreements with the Frontier Group of 500 tonnes of pre-sales at a very high premium of US $1,000 per tonne for CO2 credit. So that gives you an indication of the extent at which early adopters are prepared to pay premium prices for carbon removals. Quite recently now, we've secured a $1 million New South Wales government grant for their clean technology fund, and that 2-year project will be focusing on sustainable aviation fuel. And we'll be working with our 2 research partners, the Sydney University and the University of Newcastle, on that project. And with the current fundraising, we're looking to raise $1.5 million to complete field trials through next year and prepare for scalable manufacture of our modules. So moving on to full commercialization, we'd probably look to raise a much larger amount through late 23, early 24 to fund the establishment of our own research and development lab and look to manufacture our cartridge facilities. We also are working with the University of Newcastle and their Trailblazer program, a federal government initiative, to the potential of a $10 million grant program, also focusing on e-fuels. And later, what the vision for the company is to be involved with the establishment of an interesting phrase called megadactories, which is a play on Tesla's gigafactories, but focusing on DAC modules, wide-scale deployment to actually make a difference to climate change. And of course, there's a number of competitors in the marketplace. There's a lot of money flowing into this sector, both in North America and Europe. And just a grab from a few of those companies out there. Climeworks is the leader. They've been going at it a lot longer than we have. They recently raised 600 million Swiss francs and a capital raising, which you'd expect would value the company at over $2 billion. There's some DAC startups that were also recipient of a Musk X Prize funding, Heirloom, Sistera, and Verdox. And there's also funds out there such as Lower Carbon Capital that have set up a fund dedicated to investing in the DAC space. So there's a lot of money flowing into the sector. I guess we'd in our view, we would say we're the first with a MOF-based operating module for direct air capture. We like all fellow DAC technology developers, are looking to move down the cost curve. So we're starting at a relatively high number. We mentioned that $1,000 per ton, which is about $1,400 Australian. So that's our starting point. And as we look to move down the curve, I guess we draw parallels with how PV solar and lithium-ion batteries have moved down in cost as the manufacturing volumes have increased. And potentially we can get lower than $100 a ton, but we have a target with our collaborators to see if we can get down to $100 a ton by 2027. We have some amazing people in our team. And I guess the very heartening thing with what we're doing is that we don't have any problem attracting quality people to our mission. I guess we have the angels on our side in terms of a business plan, and people that come on board are just wholeheartedly committed. They're actually not joining for money. They're joining to help us with delivering on our mission. And number one of those is Professor Deanna D'Alessandro. She's a professor of chemistry at University of Sydney. She's a global metal organic framework expert. She cut her teeth working in Berkeley University in California at the start of her career. A very solid founding for where she is now, which is leading a brilliant team at the university. Also part of our team is Andrew Hinson, and Andrew brings the manufacturing expertise. He's had a long career at General Motors Holden. A lot of people out there listening may know the Monaro car. Growing up in Australia is near and dear to a lot of people's heart. He brought that to market in half the time and a quarter of the usual budget. So he comes with a good pedigree in terms of adapting what we're doing to make it low cost for manufacture. I have a long career in the energy and resources sector and technology commercialization. I was actually assisting the CSIRO with their DAC initiatives for a 3-year period through 2015 to 2018. So the current funding round, as I mentioned, we're looking to raise 1.5 million, which will take us through to the end of next year to complete field trials and prepare for scale up. And as mentioned, also look to have a follow-up round late 23, early 24 of a much larger amount as the expectations of things go well over the next 12 months. So thank you for the time and look forward to your questions.
Thanks for that, Rowan. So, yeah, great ground covered there. And just once again, for questions, just please pop them in the Q&A panel down there at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll go and get to them as soon as possible. Just a couple of questions that came in for people who couldn't make it tonight that I'll go to first. So we've noticed a bit of information about the plant-based protein market, especially you've just mentioned it there in the slides. Obviously, like different technology than the direct air capture system. Do you want to just talk us through a little bit about why that market opportunity is particularly attractive and how it sort of ties in with the other initiatives you're doing?
Yeah, it's a very interesting opportunity. We haven't spent a lot of time on it so far, and it's really piqued our interest of late for 3 reasons. One is it's quite a forgiving use of CO2 in that you only need an elevated CO2 enhanced air for growing the algae, which is what we do, the algae for the source of the protein. You only need about 3 to 5% enhanced air with CO2. The other aspect is it's a very high premium market. Proteins powders, which you may have seen walking in the chemist or at your local gym, sell for upwards of $100 a kilogram, which is $100,000 a ton. So it's a very premium price market. But interesting also that the meat-based protein powders have a very large carbon footprint. I saw a source the other day, whey protein has a carbon footprint of 95 tons per ton of whey protein. So those 3 aspects give us some encouragement that that's a target market we should be going after.
Absolutely. And just follow up to that one regarding the, it's great to have all these different options for monetization in terms of your business model that you covered there. Given that there were a few listed and there's a few opportunities, just wanted to know which ones in particular the team is prioritizing or maybe just at the top of the list in terms of you think the best opportunity for commercialization.
Yeah, look, prioritization is a major issue for small companies such as ourselves. We have limited people, limited financial resources. We're very much focused on the CO2 technology, the DAC technology, and at the heart of that is the MOF absorbent, the substrate that we coat it onto. We actually call that the cartridge, and it sits within the canister. That's very much our focus. And then we'll work with collaborators to help us get to a product and into market. But very much our focus is on the core technology.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's got to come first. So question here from Malcolm. Thanks for your question. So Malcolm's asking, how does Southern Green Gas currently compare itself to the competitors, and why will MOF work better than the technology they're using?
Okay, well, so I mentioned Climeworks has been around for quite a while. They have a technology that they're deploying in Iceland. It requires a lot of steam as the source of energy for their process. So what we've looked at with our process is to be solar powered, which is very much applicable to the Australian situation. So very scalable in Australia, you know, huge amounts of non-arable land in Australia, great solar resource. So we've designed our module to be solar powered. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that MOFs are very tailorable. So we can use different sources of heat. So for example, we can use resistive heating, which is powered from electricity. So we don't need a source of steam. We don't need to be next to an industry that has cheap process heat. We're very flexible in that solution. But also we think that our MOF at the end of the day will have better absorption properties than other systems that people are developing.
Yeah, thanks for that. Interesting to hear the adaptation of the technology based on the environment that you're in. Yeah, very fascinating from that perspective. Got a question here from Natalie, also on the competition. So Natalie is asking, the competitors appear to be mostly much bigger / more advanced. You've put forward your MOF tech as your differentiator. Can you elaborate on this, please? Yeah,
sure. I guess the three DAC technology developers that are quite prominent and larger or more advanced than us would be Climeworks, Global Thermostat, and Carbon Engineering. I've just mentioned Climeworks. Carbon Engineering have a very high temperature process, looks more like a refinery than a modular system. Global Thermostat is also an amine based process, which is, you know, relatively mature technology. I guess what we're doing is our modular approach looks like it's very much where the industry is heading. So, you know, very large, capital intensive, big vessels, I think is not where the industry is heading. So a lot of these new DAC developers that are still in the lab, moving out of lab, like Heirloom and Sistera, they're going down the modular path as well. I think we've got a bit of a first mover advantage in that respect. I think one of the things that we do with MOFs that other people haven't been able to achieve with MOFs to date is to operate on humid air, you know, real live conditions. The air that we breathe has lots of water in it. That's a real live environment. That has been a major challenge which we have solved, which I think others are still struggling with. But now that we've solved it, we can use all the advantage of MOFs in terms of their flexibility, tailorability, and ultimately low cost. Absolutely. And just while we're talking about the differentiator, the modular design, is that also an advantage for you in terms of, you know, maybe less capital required to bring products to market, or is the manufacturing process particularly capital intensive? Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more, please? Yes, it's because as you say, the fuel is free, because, you know, we get our carbon from the atmosphere, and in the case of our e-fuel, we get the water from the atmosphere as well. Because the fuel and the sunlight, of course, is free, it all gets down to capital intensity. So can you make the process as cheap as possible, and can you get the finance for it as cheap as possible? So it's not only making it cheap, but also being able to attract low cost sources of capital. And here I'm talking about, for example, infrastructure funds. So we want to make it as reliable and a long life an asset as possible that attracts low cost capital, like infrastructure funds. But through mass manufacture, we want to seek to get the capital cost down as low as possible. So we tell people we're sort of in the appliance business. We're not in the business of building process plants. We're sort of in the appliance business, like washing machines. You know, our modules are designed to be plug and play. You take them to site from the factory, plug them in, and away you go.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely a different approach there, which is exciting. Got a question here about just asking, can you speak to ownership and IP? And I'll just also add that, you know, when the offer document comes out, I'm sure there'll be more details about that in there. But if you want to speak to it in broad terms, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, we have a number of patent applications in various stages of process. People that understand the IP process, patents take a long time to actually get granted. So we haven't had any granted yet, but we're getting close on our early ones. But in terms of the relationship we have with Sydney University, we own all new IP that's created through our collaboration with Sydney University. So we don't have to license it, we own it. So that gives us the security to move forward with a solid IP base.
Thanks for that. And thanks to everyone for getting your questions in. We'll try and get through them as best we can. And just to follow up on that one, I know you were talking there just about your relationship with the University of Sydney and the commercialisation process. Do you want to go into some more detail? Because we understand, obviously, you know, commercialising, you know, research and technology from universities isn't always the most straightforward path. But yeah, can you just elaborate on how that's been going and your plans for the future?
Yeah, look, I'll throw to Brett because he's a bit of an old hand at technology commercialisation. But yeah, to say we had a straight line to where we are today would be joking. So yeah, please elaborate, Brett.
Yeah, look, thanks, Rowan. I think it's both exciting and important for people to understand the pathway we've been on here for the past few years. So the technology roadmap that we've been on really is a continuous process of upgrading and optimization. And there's been a number of key pivots that we've undertaken as we've been developing this technology. And I thought might be useful if I give you an example of 3 or 4 examples of where we have pivoted in this story already. So Rowan, I think, has explained the key way that this technology works. It's all about developing the MOF powder, if I can call that, which you then put on a substrate, and you introduce air to that and you absorb CO2, and then you've got a desorbent. So we've had a number of challenges that we've met and had to change our pathways as we move through it. So talking about the substrate upon which the MOF gets affixed. Initially, we brought in a substrate from the United States and did all of our trialing on that. We found that to be really not fit for purpose and quite expensive. So we had to pivot away from that and started working with local suppliers. Rowan's also mentioned one of the key challenges to do with MOFs, which we addressed or came up against early on and have had to pivot towards, and that is that we initially had, and others have as well, a good MOF formulation which could attract and hold CO2 from dry air. But once you put it into an ambient air situation, you find it had water vapor with it, and the water vapor tended to clog up the little porous holes in the MOF where you're trying to get the CO2. So that became quite an issue for us. And Deanna D'Alessandro, who Rowan has spoken of at the University of Sydney, has done some fantastic work in developing an alternative reconfigured MOF that can address that issue. And that's a major breakthrough. We're not aware of anybody really who has been able to do that. So that was a major pivot for us, was the actual formulation of the MOF. Going back to the substrate, we have to raise heat in the substrate once the MOF has attracted all the CO2 to get the MOF to get the CO2 to come back out. Initially, we were exploring doing that with heated water. And as we got into that, we found that was quite problematic. It was causing leakings and other problems. So we pivoted away from that towards an electricity-based heating, which is what we're using at the moment. And then I guess the last example I'd give of the way we've had to pivot through the story is that, going back to the substrate, we have explored the potential of 3D printing the substrate to give us the maximum surface area that we can coat with CO2. But as that's developed and where it sits at the moment, we're finding that we're not getting the uniformity across the printed material, 3D structure that we really need. So in our current formulation, we've pivoted towards an aluminium thin substrate, which we've been able to quite successfully coat with our MOF formulation. So really there, I'm just giving an example of the journey that any technology company's on. DAC is a very big and challenging exercise for the world to address, and we're no different from anybody else in having to meet these responses and pivot as we find the individual problems. So that's the journey we're on, and we'll still be on. Thanks, back to you.
Yeah, and I think, could I just add to that? And look, we've all lived and breathed the last few years with the pandemic. We kicked off our Wallumbilla demonstration project in March 2020, the same month as the start of the pandemic. And, you know, it was a very challenging time. And just going back to that international group that we started working with, they had a really neat solution. But I think probably the fundamental problem we had was trying to transfer materials from one side of the planet to the other. It just created delays that was just not sustainable through the project. So yeah, that was another set of challenges, which of course we all lived through, but we experienced that as well, and it impacted both our cost and schedule through that period.
Thanks for that. Thanks for painting a picture on the journey you've been on with that. So obviously, for most technology companies, a lot of trial and error, but you know, it seems like at each iteration you're getting some big improvements. So jumping back into the questions, and thanks again for everyone for your questions. We've got 15 open questions here, so we'll try and get through them as best we can. We do have a hard stop at 7, so we'll do our best here. So we've got a question from Matt asking about the next tranche of capital, how that will be spent. He's also saying, sorry if you missed it. It actually was earlier in the presentation, Matt. So when we send the recording out after, I just refer you to that one, but I'll ask another one of your questions further down, which is related to what Rowan and Brett were just talking about with the DAC there. So Matt's asked, when you say that the DAC is the priority, how much of the team's capital / time over the next little while will be dedicated to the DAC? Next 5 years, he's saying. So protein versus fuel is, I guess, the split there.
Well, in terms of the core DAC technology, I'd say at the moment it's 100% or 110%. We live and breathe it each day. I think we're going to stay very close over the next 5 years to that core technology. We will move into the manufacture of the MOF. We may, in fact, manufacture or work with a manufacturing partner on the cartridge, but that's probably as far as we want to go. So we're not going to stray too far from that core. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for that one, Matt. Got a question here around just more explanation around your relationship with Aspira DAC. Yeah, obviously, those partners are very important, so just wanted a little bit more detail on that, if you can.
Yeah, look, we're quite excited by this. Aspira DAC is a recently formed company as a subsidiary of a carbon project developer called Corporate Carbon out of Sydney, and they've built up a nice little business over the last 10 years doing soil carbon and savanna burning and other carbon-related projects. So they're a project developer, and so their role is to put together these carbon removal projects, you know, sell the credits or find buyers for the credits, find the capital for the project, secure the sequestration sites, and we would supply into the project our DAC modules. So that's how we work with them on the carbon removal side.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that. Got a question here from Juan asking about, with the field trials being set up in regional non-arable land, just asking about, you know, any sort of security monitoring of these modules, just to make sure that, you know, they're not tampered with or people aren't stealing the technology. Have you thought about
that? Yeah, I guess security is less of an issue when you're out in the boondocks, but because it's hot and dusty out there, you don't get too many people going there. But yeah, I expect we'll probably have, you know, some fencing and security cameras. But yeah, look, it's pretty hard to reverse engineer our technology. You could grab hold of a bit of our MOF powder, but you'd struggle to work out what's in it. So but yeah, IP security is a major concern. I mean, the biggest concern we have is online security, hacking as opposed to physical.
Yeah.
Data.
Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, if you get a hold of a can of Coke, you can't really just figure out what's in it. I'm sure it's similar, but yeah, online security are a very hot topic at the moment with data breaches. So yeah, any comments about that in terms of online security and what you're doing there to make sure that important intellectual property stays secure?
Yeah, look, we're not a big user of cloud because of security issues. We're quite distributed in how we operate. We use 2 levels of protection when we transfer documents. So, I think we're continuing to review how we operate.
Yeah, thanks for that. Got a question here from Malcolm asking, is your moth able to capture methane or is it just carbon?
That's a very good question. We actually have conceptualized a moth-based methane absorption desorption unit. The methane levels in the atmosphere are very, very dilute. So just to give you an example, CO2 in the atmosphere is 400 parts per million. Methane in the atmosphere is 200 parts per billion. So it is very, very dilute. We actually have thought about methane capture in feedlots, for cows, where the methane concentrations would be locally higher within an enclosed feedlot. So that may be something we can look at in the future. But yeah, look, at the IPC have said historically, I think 30% of the global greenhouse impact has been attributed to methane in the atmosphere, not CO2. So yes, it is something that needs addressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, interesting to know. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack with the methane is so diluted.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting to hear the applications there. So question here about patents. We've sort of covered patents already with one of the other questions, and there is going to be a lot more details in the offer document. So I'll just refer that question to the offer document. Another question here regarding the capital raise. So the question from Graham here is, how do you intend to raise extra capital in the future, so around 2024? And does this reduce our current share value? And also, are you intending to list on the ASX? So I'll just give a little bit of clarity around this as well, and then obviously throw to Rowan and Brett for their comments. So when it comes to like subsequent rounds of capital, obviously there'll be details in the company constitution about dilution and how that works. So I'll refer you to that, and that'll be available when the offer goes live as well. But depending on what the terms of the next deal are, if that's an up round, if the company is sort of, moving up and progressing, then, they'll be raising capital, but your shares will be worth more. So that's usually how it works for private companies. But yeah, over to the Southern Green Gas team for any comments around that.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of tailwinds blowing in our direction in this sector. And so we're seeing, more capital flow into the sector, as I mentioned in the presentation. That takes the form of, for example, people setting up climate tech funds, both in Australia and overseas, specifically looking to invest in the sort of things we've been doing. Also, government grants have flowed into the sector and are continuing to flow in the sector. The government agency Arena is a big contributor. The Clean Energy Finance Corporation, I mentioned just the New South Wales government is putting funding in this area, as other states in Australia. So there's more grant funding becoming available as well. So those grant funding is good because it's non-dilutive for shareholders. So we like grant funding, and we'd like to see more of it. But yeah, look, we try to grow the value of the company, and because Brett and I are founders, we get diluted as well. So we try to minimize that. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's a track record building with Southern Green Gas in terms of accessing those grants, and a big announcement recently from the New South Wales government of a grant awarded there. If you haven't seen that, please look at the news feed on Birchal for details. They posted that there about a week ago, so you can check it out. Got a question here about how is the pre-money valuation derived? So again, I'll keep referring people to the offer document for all the details, because we've got to keep you waiting for something on Tuesday in terms of something to be released. But maybe you can talk through the process that you went through to derive your company valuation. Obviously, it's a big decision to come to. So just any comments about that?
Yeah, look, at technology companies that have exposure to very large potential markets tend not to get, tend to be measured in different ways than, you know, a traditional company that's making cash flow and selling a product day in, day out. So if you look at Climeworks, they've got a market value in excess of $2 billion. If you look at some other DAC technology startups like Heirloom and Sistera that have secured tens of millions of dollars of investment, which means their valuation would probably be, you know, 2 to 3 times that. So really, that's probably how we look to value ourselves, is through comparatives. What other companies in our sector doing something similar are worth. That's really, you know, market-based evaluation. We recognise that we're still early days, so, you know, we're realistic about it, but we're in as I say, a market with some very strong tailwinds.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously more details to come in the offer document, but yeah, company comparisons is definitely one of the most common ways for valuing, especially early stage companies like this one. We've got a question from Gary around patents. Again, I think we've covered that one, Gary. Yeah, and there'll be heaps more details in the offer document. The question is, can this top technology be patented? And I think the answer is yes, from what we've discussed tonight, unless I'm getting that wrong.
Martin, I should just add that a big part of our IP is secret know-how.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people forget that. In fact, I heard from a venture capital group the other day that said that, you know, they placed less importance on patents these days and more on, you know, first to market and secret know-how. So we do have a combination there.
Yeah, very good point there. Yeah, it's not all about patents, especially when it comes to fast-moving markets like this. Got a question here from David, just around how much CO2 is removed per unit at the moment, and also life of the filter. So sorry, per unit per annum, and then also the life of the filter is this question.
Yeah, so the DAC module is designed to capture 2 tons per annum of CO2. The life of the filter, as you call it, the MOF absorbent, that's an open question at this point in time. We have not done long-term durability testing at this stage. We have done some accelerated testing, some cycling. Actually, we cycle it, or we immerse the material in boiling water as a way of sort of simulating long-term degradation. So all those tests so far have shown a stable absorbent, MOF-based absorbent. But yes, today I can't tell you we've had something cycling for a year. The intention through next year is to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those trials will continue. Got a question here. We've got actually 2 questions on this topic, and it's a very relevant one. So just wanted to know why have you chosen crowdfunding in terms of raising around here, and you know, why not go to VCs? And I know you've mentioned before we've raised funds previously. If you want to add some more details to that too, please feel free to.
Yes. So we have 2 venture capital groups as existing shareholders, so Artesian and also the Victorian Cleantech Fund, and both are very strong supporters of what we're doing. I guess why crowdfunding? We thought that there was a latent demand out there for people that wanted to make a contribution to combating climate change, but didn't really have a lot of choices out there of what they could do. And so that's why we're doing this, try and give people an opportunity to say, well, you know, I can make a contribution. It's a small contribution, but a lot of people making a contribution makes a meaningful amount of capital for us. And we're going to very judiciously spend that capital on your behalf, but that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the great thing about equity crowdfunding as a vehicle now that wasn't, you know, available too long ago, is that, you know, businesses that you believe in and, you know, companies that you want to see, you know, become, you know, a large player in the market in the future, you're able to back at this early and really crucial stage. So, you know, this is a very important time for that. So everyone on this call. Just wanted to point that out. Only since 2018 has this been a possibility. Melinda has a question here about mass manufacturing, which is obviously a big part of the operations for your future plans. Just wondering where this might occur in Australia. Have you put any thought into that?
Yes, we have. In fact, the Trailblazer project that I mentioned previously, that will focus on module manufacture. We intend to do the manufacture in regional locations. A good example is in New South Wales, the state government have earmarked Parks, the town of Parks, and they have a special activation precinct which is looking to attract advanced manufacturing. And the Queensland government is doing something similar as well as other states. But the good thing with regional location is we can tap into renewable solar electricity to power the factory. Regional towns such as Parks and Dubbo have their own university faculty, so we can tap into skilled local labour, and the land's a little bit cheaper in the regional area as well. So it makes a lot of sense. And we're absolutely committed to manufacturing in Australia.
Yeah,
there's no reason why we can't do it.
And just in terms of, I guess, you've mentioned a few sort of government initiatives in those areas for advanced manufacturing. Do you see this technology potentially replacing any existing, carbon intensive technologies in terms of workforces being in regional areas? Is that something on your radar at all?
Yeah, well, in fact, we looked at the town of Muswellbrook as a potential location for a module, a pilot factory. And of course, Muswellbrook is a town with 2 major coal-fired power stations and surrounding coalfields, and potentially those jobs are at risk. So yes, there are places where there probably will need to be transitioning of jobs into these new areas, and we'd love to be able to create some high-tech jobs that people can transition into, because I think that's what Australia needs, is to rebuild its manufacturing base.
Absolutely, and doing it from an advanced technical perspective seems to be on everyone's agenda too. So that's great that that's sort of aligning with you guys. A couple more questions here. So we've got a little bit of time left. If anyone has any more burning questions, please feel free to chuck them in, because I think we will be able to get through them all. Got a question here from Natalie. So just asking about, how about the materials / resources used in your manufacturing components? What does the availability trajectory look like? I.e., are we talking about abundant materials that you do not anticipate being particularly price sensitive as demand increases?
Yeah, so I mentioned that with our MOF material, we have the whole periodic table to pick from. We do actually pick, so at the heart of it, we have metal ions. So we tend to pick common metal ions which are readily available, such as aluminium and zirconium, readily available in Australia as well, where there's no particular supply issue. So another aspect of what we're doing with Deanna at University of Sydney is looking at green chemistry in terms of recyclability of the absorbent when it gets to the end of its useful life, and also using more environmentally friendly synthesis methods for making our MOFs that don't need a lot of solvents, or can be actually synthesized without solvents. So recyclability and green chemistry are very much part of what we're looking to implement going forward.
Thanks for that. And Natalie had a follow-up question, which I think you touched on there as well, about just, comment about, circularity of resources. So, if you've got any more to add to that, I think Natalie would like to know, but you might have already covered it in your answer.
Yeah, well, you look at, we use aluminium in our module. Our supplier sources their aluminium from a Canadian company, which makes their aluminium from hydropower. So it's completely renewable energy powered. There are groups such as Sumitomo that are supplying aluminium with a 60 to 70% recycled component. So there's various initiatives out there that lower the carbon footprint of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And good to hear that you're thinking about that. Malcolm here is asking a question about, so could you please elaborate on the $1,000 per tonne paid by Frontier? He says it seems high given the current price of an ACCU is at about $30 per tonne.
Yeah, it's a good question. The ACCUs do not involve the capture of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And that's the key differentiator here. So the reason that groups such as Frontier are willing to pay such a premium is they want to help DAC developers such as ourselves to move down the cost curve. So they are paying a very high premium, but fairly small quantities of carbon credits, but to help us and others move down that cost curve. So the ACCUs is a very different market. It's not DAC-based carbon removals.
Yeah. Martin, it's Brett here. I might just add quickly to that because a senior representative of the Frontier Group has actually been in Sydney the last couple of days and talking about this program and why they are doing as they're doing with such a high value. And they call this an advanced marketing commitment. And they draw a comparison to the way this concept was used a few years ago to create medicines to address issues that had not yet emerged. So some of the big pharma companies were not prepared to develop the inoculations that you need for distant problems that were emerging. So advanced marketing commitment was where a number of companies came together and said, okay, we will give you money to start to develop this medicine now. That was very successful. And so people like Frontier have taken that same concept and applied it to encourage the development of direct air capture of CO2, carbon removals.
Thanks for that, Brett. And thanks for your question, Malcolm. I think Malcolm knows his stuff, the questions he's asking here. So yeah, keep them coming, Malcolm. Thanks so much for that. I've got a couple more questions, and like I said, we're getting close to time here. So yeah, any more burning questions, please chuck them in. We'll probably got time for just a handful more. I've got a question here asking, can you please explain how the captured carbon is taken off each module and gathered, and then it's used? If it's sequestered, what is involved?
Okay, so deployment, we'd be deploying many hundreds of thousands of modules, and we aggregate the output from each module in a collection pipe, and we would pipe that through to a central location, either an injection well where it'd be compressed up to supercritical pressure and pumped down the well, or in the case of e-fuels, we would react the CO2 on the site with hydrogen, which is also generated on the site, and put that either in the form of methane into an existing gas pipeline, or potentially as methanol, or aviation fuel, which could be put into bulk tankers and railed to port.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. So we've got another question here from Malcolm asking about, going into a bit more detail about the emissions footprint of the modules, considering sourcing, manufacture, disposal, etc. across its life. Obviously, that's probably a hard thing to calculate exactly, but have you thought about that in any detail?
Yeah, we had to, when we applied for the Musk Prize, we had to do our own carbon footprint calculation of our module. And the biggest carbon footprint was actually the PV panels, which might surprise people, but the silicon in them, which I think has to be raised to temperatures above 1,000 degrees. Most of the PV panels are made in China using coal-fired power. So, not good, not a good carbon footprint at all. I think there's a great opportunity for Australia to actually make our own photovoltaic panels with printed solar, which has a material intensity of fraction of silicon-based solar, uses far less materials, and will have a much lower, and we could actually use energy from solar to manufacture the printed solar PV. So there's a few groups in Australia that are doing it, CSIRO, University of Newcastle. I think that's the way of the future, and get the carbon footprint down of PV panels.
Yeah, absolutely. You can imagine that becoming a part of your manufacturing process once you get that ramped up, looking at the supply chain and really drilling down on that. But obviously testing prototypes, we need to test concepts. So we need to do that quickly. Final question, just because we're running out of time here, and I'll leave a minute or two just for some comments from the team at the end. Obviously, the technology you're developing here has great social benefit as well as obviously commercial benefit here. But in terms of getting it out and distributing it, how do you sort of weigh those decisions about the social benefit of technology like this versus obviously the commercial need to have a sustainable business?
Well, the social license to operate is a fundamental part of our business, and we're working with Sydney University and their group there, which is looking at stakeholder management. We believe very much in value sharing with the communities in which we propose to operate, with Indigenous people, with local landowners, creating jobs in regional areas. They're very much front of mind of what we do, very much part and parcel of how we operate. We're starting early, but you know, we'll very much front of mind those social issues as we move forward.
Martin, I just might add quickly to that as well. Some of the large corporations that are buying carbon removals, like Microsoft and so forth, are particularly focusing on co-benefits, which is really what you're talking about. And they are prepared to pay more for carbon removal certificates which address co-benefits. Also, co-benefits has become a major component of the huge 3.5 billion DAC hubs program of the US administration, where they're going to develop a whole series of DAC hubs, and with very, very strong government support. But there again, that support will be available if you can demonstrate co-benefits beyond just pulling the CO2 from the atmosphere. So it's emerging as a very strong element of this new industry.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Definitely got to think about it from all angles with the industry you're in, and it's great to hear that you put a lot of thought into it. So just in wrapping up now, and I just want to thank again for everyone who's attended the webinar and given us part of your evening to be here. So really appreciate that, and all the questions. We have some great questions. Got through 21 questions in the end, so that's really, really good. Just a few points from Birchal before I throw back to the team for some final comments. So from here, the offer is due to go live on Tuesday next week. So everyone on this call, I'm assuming you've already registered to be part of the expression of interest list, which means you have priority access to this offer when it goes live. So for the first 48 hours of this offer, it's all for you. People who registered on the EOI list, you get first dibs at it. So definitely would recommend keeping an eye out for it when it launches, and you know, that's your window to invest before it goes live to the public. And it, you know, we have seen offers fill up pretty quickly before, so you just want to make sure you don't miss out. Also, just final comments about, you know, tonight's been a great sort of forum for questions and answers, but the team at Southern Green Gas are obviously still open for any questions you might have to follow up, you know, so look out for emails from them, and feel free to engage with them for any further questions about this project and about the investment moving forward. So in saying that, I'll now just throw back to the Southern Green Gas team for final comments to the investors or potential investors who are on this call tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. We appreciated the opportunity and really appreciated the great questions that have been tabled. Look, we love what we're doing. We're totally committed to trying to make this work, and we'd love to have you supporting us and come along for the ride.
Yeah, I'd just add thanks again for some great questions, and also thanks to the support we get from the Birchal team in setting these events up. So great, thanks, Martin.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, no, we really, really love hosting offers like this. And final one for me is that just look out. We'll have the webinar recording available tomorrow. It'll be going out with a YouTube link, so just look out for that one. And like I said earlier, if anyone missed it and couldn't be here tonight, feel free to share it with them. But thanks again to everyone who joined, and the Southern Green Gas team for answering all those questions. It's been a really informative evening. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.